Welcome to The Testament, a podcast that spotlights the amazing real-life stories of everyday people who've been transformed by their surrender to Jesus Christ. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of one of the many miraculous before and after accounts of lives forever changed by encountering the Savior.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Testament Podcast. My name is Jeff Keck. Once again, my brother Darius couldn't make it to this episode, but he will be back for the next episode. But we are once again glad to be back from our summer break, and we're sitting here now with Chad Patterson. Chad, how are you today?
I am great, brother. Good to see you this evening.
Man, it's good to see you too. And like my previous guest, you two were scheduled for back in April, and then I had to cancel on you because we took a little bit of a break and some things happened. And then immediately upon saying, hey, are you still interested? You had a very quick email response, said absolutely. So thank you for your patience for me and coming back and joining this podcast with me.
It's my pleasure. Always great to talk about the Lord. So
yeah, absolutely. So tell me about yourself.
Well, Jeff, I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I'm a granddad. Don't laugh. I'm not that old. Don't laugh at me like that. I'm a CEO of a nonprofit. I'm a leadership coach. I'm a Sunday school class teacher. I dated myself. I'm a life group connect the leader. And I'm here to serve and lead. And that's really who Chad is. So.
Yeah. So you married 17 years. You said 5 children, right?
My wife and I are blended, Liz.
Yep.
She's the best part of us. And yeah, we were married 17 years ago. We have 5 kiddos and 10 grandkids, Jeff. So
10 grandkids.
Our children, the oldest just turned 12 and the youngest is almost a year and a half. And so God has really shown off in and through our kids. It's been a special season.
That's pretty awesome. I'm not sure how you get 10 grandkids when you're 23 years old, but hey. Good
I like
job.
your math. Yeah.
However you did that.
Thank you.
I went to, I actually went to, well, I'm not even going to say it because that would be rude. I was going to tell you the school district I went to, and you would know why I don't know math. But anyway, hey, so this podcast, really, we brag on God here.
Yep.
And so one of the best ways to brag on God, and coincidentally, one of the best ways to share the gospel of Christ is to tell how we found Jesus in our lives. So just give us a little rundown of how Christ came into your life. And, how old was that? That was,
I was 8
years
old.
Said. Yeah. Okay. So tell us how you,
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So I grew up in North Houston. The suburb, Aldine is a suburb of North Houston. My dad was a head football coach. My mom's was a concert pianist. We grew up at First Baptist Church in Glen Rose, right in North Houston. So I've been.
So you're familiar with humidity?
Oh my gosh, yes. Even here in Northeast Texas, it's humid, but not like Houston. So
right, yeah.
I know God has a purpose for that for some reason. But I grew up in church. Was saved on April 21st, 1973. So I'm going to date myself there. And what was really cool is during a revival, and the pastor, Reverend Dr. Mayfield, was actually officiated my mom and dad's wedding. So it was a very sentimental time. But for an 8-year-old, I knew I needed something to be whole, and that was Jesus. And really, since then, Jeff, I think I'm still getting to know who Jesus is.
Yeah,
I've lived in church my whole life, served in church, and I continue to seek His heart. And He continues to reveal Himself more and more. But it started at 8, and I've been very blessed with very godly parents, my wife as well. And church has been a huge part of our life. But it's really, even more than that, it's about a relationship with a living God. Mm-hmm. And He showed up in flesh in my life and loved me, and continues to do that. So that is a lifelong pursuit for me to know His heart and be more like Him. So
I think it's interesting that you said at 8 years old you felt the need that something had to be whole, right?
Yeah.
So what can you explain what it is that made you feel like you weren't whole and you needed to be whole? And then after that, can you explain kind of where were you? Like what scenario brought you to Jesus, the realization that Jesus would make you whole?
It's really, great question. So I can remember, again, every time the doors were opened, Wednesday night, Sunday night, my dad was a deacon, vacation Bible school, and steroids. I just remember this feeling of I'm just not complete. I can't tell you the depth of that from an 8-year-old's perspective now, but I knew there was something missing. I think a lot of it had to do just with being surrounded by that teaching and that example and my parents and being part of a local church like that. I think I was very blessed to had so many seeds planted within me that I was old enough to recognize that, yes, Jesus makes me whole and complete. And honestly, I think it only means even more even today. While that journey started during a VBS session, and then during a revival, which we used to have back in the day, right?
Yeah.
I think just the timing of that, and it was right around Easter, Jeff, and I can remember too. I'm really going to date myself watching the Charlton Hester.
Heston, Charleston Heston.
What comes on every Easter?
Ten
Commandments,
Commandments.
right? And so
Yeah.
I really think, not to sound silly or by any means disrespectful, I think just the timing and the cultivation that had gone in my life, I was old enough to say, okay, this makes sense. Enough for an 8-year-old to say, hey, I want to be with Jesus. And so I can remember walking down the aisle and being baptized. Very special memories still. I still get chills when we pass that church. It's still inactive. It's an all Hispanic congregation now, but whenever I go home and go by there, it still brings back a flood of thanksgiving in my heart. But man, it's a lifelong journey still to really seek the heart of God and the heart of Jesus, and just to continue to pursue that. It's not a finish line. It's a growth line. And so thanks for the opportunity to share that.
Yeah. So at 8 years old, now I've got a 9-year-old. Actually, I've got a 22-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So all 4 of my kids have been 8 at some point. And so accepting Jesus at 8 years old, a lot of times, and I don't know how it was with you, but obviously you felt like you were complete, right? But was there still something missing, like a knowledge base or maybe a realization of what a true relationship with Christ was and meant?
Absolutely.
And if that was missing, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying if that wasn't quite developed in an 8-year-old yet, at what point? Well, first off, did your life immediately change, or throughout the rest of school? Which, I mean, 8 years old, you're in what, 4th grade or something like that. So all the way through the rest of 12th grade, how was your life there? And then where was it that really you kind of understood that there was a relationship necessity?
Yes, great question. So again, 8 years old, right? So every year, just that continued exposure, if you will. And I lived in a very godly home. I think just over time, it starts to marinate and resonate.
Yeah.
But I think in high school, I was the little chubby kid in junior high. Didn't like myself very much, and really went through a tough season of skipping the bus and missing school. And I just didn't want to be in school. I didn't like who Chad was at that point. And I think that's when it really began to sink into me that there was something missing. I think on the outside as an 8-year-old, being the oldest child, I'm sure there was a part of me that was wanting to please and check the box and do the right thing. And, in my understanding, I was doing the right thing. But I think once I got into junior high and especially into high school, I started to really understand that there is an emptiness that only Christ can fill. And so thankfully, we stayed plugged into church. I had a very loving, godly youth minister. And so my freshman year, it's really interesting how God does this. I played baseball, and I lost my freshman year probably 30 pounds and grew about 6 inches. And baseball became more of a reality for me. And I made the varsity my sophomore year. And so baseball, it wasn't my God, but it was a platform that I think the Lord really showed off in me of who he was. And that became a really special part of my life. So youth ministry and baseball was really the roadmap for me in terms of my spiritual growth, frankly. And that was all the way through Baylor. I played ball all the way through Baylor. And so the Lord used baseball as a platform for me. First of all, it taught me lessons of how he loved me and grew me. And but it also gave me an opportunity to tell others about Jesus. And so that was a huge pathway of growth for me. The ups and downs of baseball caused me to lean on the Lord even more. I had 6 knee surgeries as a catcher through my career.
Wow.
So there were times where I didn't have baseball.
Yeah.
And I literally on crutches was leaning on the Lord. And he was my identity more than baseball was. And I think that's really when the shift took place in high school and college, is that Jesus is my identity. Baseball is important, and that was a huge part of my life, but he kept reminding me and showing me very faithfully that he was the one that was going to sustain me.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, I think, a season then where it really started to sink in. And then after college, in my first marriage, you learn a lot in marriage, and having your first kids and your first job. And again, all these opportunities to remind us that we are nothing without him. Um, and then going through a divorce, that was another probably mountaintop experience that turned into a valley of despair, but that's where God showed up in a very real way. So I feel like there's been seasons of my life where he's continually reminded me, you need me, Chad. I'm here for you. I'm here to redeem you and reconcile you and restore you. And I think that journey, it just keeps going.
So yeah, I want to talk a little bit. Let's rewind a little bit,
Yeah.
because I've done a lot of research on spiritual warfare and the armor of God. I wrote a little book on the armor of God.
Oh, wow.
So
Awesome.
I've done a little bit of research on this kind of stuff. And one of the things that you said really struck me, and I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into this.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind sharing, in
Please.
junior high, one of the things you said was, I did not like Chad.
Yep.
Tell me, what was it about you that you did not like Chad? What were the feelings and the thoughts and the things that were going on in your mind in
Yep.
junior high? And I
Yep.
only say this because, A, there's probably a very obvious evidence that the enemy was attacking you spiritually
Yep.
during this time, and
Yep.
B, you are not the only one that will have gone through stuff like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and C, there's probably adults in the ages of 40s and 50s who are still dealing with some of the things that you dealt with at that time. So
Yep.
can you dig a little bit deeper into that time when, and I
Absolutely.
love that quote, and that really ought to be a title of your next book, I don't like Chad.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great, gosh, that may be the title. Don't do that. That may be the
Okay.
title of my next
Let's
book.
do it together. No, no, no. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. But tell me more about that time frame.
Well, thank you for that. So I can remember, again, my dad was a head football coach, very athletic. Athletes was a huge part of my life. I never played football. My mom was a concert pianist. I played piano, and so I have always had this desire to really excel. Even as a young kid, I wanted to be the best. I would say perfection was probably a part of that. That this feeling of, man, I've just got to be the best. And I
Yeah.
think I started to realize that I wasn't. And then I probably was wider than taller most of my junior high 3 years. My nickname was Butterball. So I
Mm.
was literally just a little fat kid, frankly, not to be crude. But so physically, I wasn't real happy. Emotionally, I didn't feel fulfilled. I couldn't make the football team. I did try out, but I couldn't make it. And so I think I experienced some failure, Jeff. And I think it caused me just to really not have much confidence, and it turned into insecurity. And I had a withdrawal, frankly, from not wanting to go to school, not wanting to play anything. I quit piano. And I think the fear of failure, frankly, as I continue to look back on that, really paralyzed me in a lot of ways. And I was frozen for about 2 or 3 years. And it was a rough scene. I know it was hard for my parents because it kind
Yeah.
of went from this shiny little Leave It to Beaver land, 8, 9, 10, and then 11, 12, 13, I just kind of tanked. And so,
Yeah.
um,
So let's dig into the source of that for a minute. Was it because of what you saw and thought about yourself? Was it because of what others said or tormented you about?
well,
Or
yeah,
a combination of the two? Or what was it?
I think it was, back then we didn't talk about bullying.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I rode the school bus like everyone. That's just what you did. But I know there were definitely we had a ton of kids on our street, but I was always the last one picked, even in dodgeball, brother. The last one picked in dodgeball. Come on, it doesn't get much worse than that. And so I did have some boys on the bus bully me, basically, emotionally and physically. But again, back then in the 70s, your dad would listen to you and say, well, okay, son, you just pull your bootstraps up and you get back on that bus. And very lovingly. He wasn't trying to throw me back to the wolves or anything, but there was a lot of external pain, I think, a lot of ridicule back then. I can remember one of the reasons too, Jeff, that I quit the piano was I can remember his name. I'm not going to say his last name because I may run into him, but Kirk, one of my dear friends, he's like, I can't believe you're such a big sissy that you're going to keep playing the piano. This is like fifth, sixth grade. And I was actually pretty good. I mean, I was gifted, and my mom, anyway, and I let it go. I regret that to this day. And I'm going to do something about that too, by the way. But I think it was just that external ridicule that turned into a really deep insecurity. And I sat there frozen for about 3 years. I know mom and dad, they poured themselves into me. We had people in the church come to me. And I think a big catalyst that really helped me out of that was getting into the youth group. And I want to say his name. Chuck Gartman was my youth minister that started my 8th and ninth grade year. And he was a very godly human that came into my life. And my mom and dad loved me and believed me and were definitely pouring into me in that time. But to have that external minister, that man, that godly man that was sent right at the right time, he just poured. And I, for whatever reason, really started to buy it. And it was always focused on Jesus. And we're still friends today. And that he was a huge catalyst for me in that. And so I guess my word of encouragement to parents would be just keep loving on your kids. It's kind of that lesson of surround your kiddos with as many godly men and women, people to pour into them, to point them to Jesus. It's way more than takes a village. It just takes the community of God to circle around our kiddos. Parents need help. My parents needed support, and I needed help too. And so I think it's a really good testimony of that as much as anything. And there's days now where I look back and I'm grateful that I had that experience. It's not to say I don't ever feel insecure today as a 59-year-old. I do, right? Yeah. But I've learned how to deal with those things. And there's plenty more opportunities where the enemy's trying to kill, steal, and destroy. 100%. And he likes to go back to some of those old things, but they're dead. We don't have to give him any power. But thanks for going there.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that story anyway, because I mean, we know in Scripture that our enemy is not flesh and blood, right? So the people are not the enemy. The spiritual enemies are who we're fighting. Now, the spiritual enemies will use flesh and blood to fulfill their purpose. So they'll use those negative words towards you, but at the same time, the enemy will speak to your thoughts in your brain too. So now, not only do you feel like you are worth less, right? But the enemy will use others around you to support that feeling that he's putting into your brain as well. So it's a spiritual battle. And you say that was in middle school. You were saved at 8 years old. And so you know, and I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast, and I'll just continue to say it forever and ever. But when you decide to surrender and give your life to Jesus, you have broken free from the prison that the Satan had you in. And so he's going to chase you and pursue you, and he's going to battle you immediately. So you're put on the front lines to immediate battle. So when you're young and you accept Christ, you're not really sure what that means, but you know that you've accepted Christ into your life. That's when the enemy really just kind of hits that hard. And he could have gone for so long in that mindset in you. And we've seen time and time again, and I've had people on this show who were to the point of suicide because of different things like that. One of the reasons I wrote my book is the realization of what had been going on for 45 years in my life. And that is just the flat out lie from the enemy about how worthless I truly was. And things that, I just believed, and then I saw supporting evidence to prove that, and then I learned how to compartmentalize it, tuck it away, lock it in a safe, and we just don't deal with it. And that went on for 45 years, and I didn't even realize that was going on. But so for you to realize that and come out of that from junior high is fantastic. But I still think it's one of those things you'll battle with the rest of your life, because that's a button he was able to push you at one time, and he knows how to hit that button again.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to pick up your book. Thanks for your testimony on that. It's interesting. You use the word button. I use the word crack a lot. Water runs to a crack. And I think about a heart. I think as I pursue Jesus, thankfully he fills my cracks. I still have them, right? If I choose them, and the enemy wants to point those cracks out. And so, yeah, there are definitely days that through scripture and just through gritting it out sometimes, um, he's not going to win.
Yeah.
And so, but it takes faithfulness on our part to continue to pursue him. One of the things I've learned to do, Jeff, and I started back then because I can remember even in college, I was very blessed to play college ball. It helped me get through school. I was, I almost got drafted. I mean, it was a beautiful experience in my life, but God continued to remind me that it was about him. Baseball was just a tool. And he reminded me he's who makes me complete. And
Mm.
so I hold on to that still. There's so
Yeah.
many times we pour ourselves into work or hobbies or things or identity comes in all these other shapes and forms. But I think more than anything, what I'm most grateful for is that he taught me very clearly that my identity is in him, and I still cling to that. And
Yeah.
that's challenging as a man, as a leader, as a dad, as a husband, out in the community. I can't imagine all that you face, just to remember who we
Yeah.
are in him. And that's always most important.
Yep. That's 100% yes. So, and like Paul says in Ephesians, we have to use the word of God to fight those lies that are
Oh,
coming
yeah.
at us. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Okay, so you get out of middle school, you kind of pass through that phase a little bit. You jump into high school. How was high school for you? Were you
It was good.
getting
So,
closer, getting better relationship with Christ at that point?
yes,
Yeah.
I say really, I go back to youth ministry and man, for all the youth ministers out there
Yeah.
that I know your job is hard and thankless sometimes, please keep doing what you're doing. I'm thankful for the Chuck Gartmans
Yeah.
who never gave up. He kept showing up. And he still does periodically. And so high school was really good. I was blessed to have I played baseball was again a huge part. I was very active at First Baptist Church Conroe. We had a very active church and youth ministry. Wonderful mission trip memories. A lot of memories of just whole good fellowship with brothers and sisters in Christ. So I'm thankful for that foundation. And it continued through college. I was blessed to experience that at Baylor as well. And so I had a really good season in high school. My dad was my high school principal. I could get away with everything. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
I think that would be worse.
no, it was beautiful. Again, that's where my dad. I have to give him a shout out because he had the perfect gift of disciplining me and in loving me. He could have his arm around
Yeah.
me and his boot on my hiney when I needed it. And so to have that support that close during high school, and my mom as well, it was a good season of life. And then, getting into college, I was blessed to play, but I started having injuries. And I think that was another season, Jeff, of where I was reminded, Chad, this is first of all not about you, and it's not about baseball. It's about me in you and how you're going to tell the world about what I've done in your life. And so
Mm.
sometimes I'm stubborn. Maybe I'm just stubborn and I needed 6 surgeries to remind me. I don't know. Maybe that was
You're
part of
not
it.
the
Jeff.
only one. There's a
Um,
whole book called the Holy Bible that's full of stubborn people that
oh,
continue to do, even though God
oh,
delivers and delivers and delivers, they continue to do
oh.
things like that. Yeah.
But thankfully,
That's
he
not
keeps
just you,
pursuing
man.
us, right? And so, and you said the word, I think too, you said the word earlier, surrender. My
Mm.
understanding of surrender in elementary school versus junior high, there was in high, I mean, the depth of surrender continues to grow in my life. And there's still days I have to remind myself I'm not on the throne.
Yeah.
And so I think that's I know it's been a lifelong pursuit for me to really learn a willing surrendering every day. It
Yeah.
doesn't get easier sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I think that's probably, if I was to think of a thread through that time in my life, it was really just being reminded by God that it's about Him in me, and that I need to continue to always surrender to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
I think there's probably a whole lot more God stories that we could talk about. But I want to move forward. At some point, you became involved in Boys and Girls Club of the Big Pines in Northeast Texas. So
I
tell
did.
me what involvement do you have in that, and tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, real quick backstory, I surrendered to ministry high school senior year, at the time thinking I was going to seminary. Um, my sister at the time was placed in a residential treatment center for behavior disorders. The summer before, after I graduated, I handed my baseball bag over to the freshman catcher and said, "Go get it." And I started focusing on my future. And I really felt I was already enrolled in seminary, Southwestern Seminary. And I went down to the residential treatment center where my sister was placed, basically to work that summer and to tell the gentleman, Clay, thank you for loving on my sister. And real
Yeah.
quick, Jeff, that was the first and only time I truly heard the audible voice of the Lord say, Chad, I want you to not go to seminary, but ministry for you is going to start in special education.
Mm.
And I did a 180, went back to school for 2 years and got my teaching certificate and began teaching special ed. All that to say, from that point forward through today, where I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs for almost 30 years, I've been an executive leader in some sort of children and family services ministry.
Wow.
And so that's really what led us here to Northeast Texas. There is a cool guide part to that, though. I thought, and I'm still growing up, by the way, but I thought at the time about 7 years ago that I was going to be a leadership coach full time when I grew up. And so I'm a John Maxwell certified coach. Completed that course. I've been doing coaching and speaking since '98. And I thought, I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to resign from the nonprofit world and just truly focus on leadership coaching. So I did that for a couple of years. We were living in Montgomery, Conroe, Texas. And I was updating my LinkedIn profile, if you know about LinkedIn, just trying to network and connect with other people. I had a very prosperous coaching business going. And this little blurb goes across the radar, Boys and Girls Clubs, Northeast Texas. And Jeff, again, is kind of like, oh, what was that? And the Lord smacked me. And long story short, I called my coach and I was like, Steve, I'm doing this and I feel like this is what I'm called to do. But I just felt this overwhelming sense of response to this Boys and Girls Club thing in Northeast Texas. And he said, tell me about it. And I told him about it. He said, Chad, that sounds just like you. He'd known me my whole life. So long story short, I prayed and submitted. And here I am 5 years later. Back in Northeast Texas, still getting to do some leadership coaching, but really back to center field, if you will, in terms of leading ministry to kids and families. And that's really where the heart of what I committed to in high school. And basically, Boys and Girls Clubs, like so many other nonprofits and ministries, our heart is to help kids grow into their God-given potential. We do that in the after-school space and your summer camp all day long and focus on academics and character and leadership. And so it's been a neat crossroads of just all my history and my past experience of leading kids and families and causing people to see how God's moving in that and to get people to walk beside us financially. It's a
So
privilege.
is that the Boys and Girls Club you're talking about?
Yeah.
So is the Boys and Girls Club a Christian organization?
Well, that's a great question. It is
because I didn't think it was, but you're talking
well,
about
the national
working.
it's changed when it was first created. Right after the Civil War, there were so many great ministries like Buckner that formed right after the Civil War to help kids and widows. Right.
Mm-hmm.
In its original origin, God was in its original mantra.
Okay.
Now it's turned into, and I want to answer this respectfully. Nationally, it's considered a secular child youth development.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Here locally in Northeast Texas, we still have the autonomy to be who we are for this community. And we are definitely a God faith-led ministry here in Northeast Texas. And
So do you have even like just one story where you've seen God just move in that?
Oh, yeah.
Not to put you on the spot.
No,
I'm sure you have many
no,
stories.
Well, just like this, God shows off, and that's what it's about. And to be a small part of a young person catching glimpse of their potential from the Lord and pursuing that. There's a young man named Tavon Green. He's now living in Tyler. Tavon grew up in the Boys and Girls Clubs in Marshall, Texas. And I met him the first week I came here, Jeff. And so Tavon's story was he lived in his car with his mom. His dad was in prison, literally a street kid. And the Boys and Girls Club became his safe haven. And to really fast forward, he went to the Boys and Girls Clubs all through high school, played basketball. He's now a father of two. They're pregnant with their third. He's completed his associate's degree, and he has a Christian ministry. He coaches basketball and teaches at a Christian school. And the Lord saved him and called him to a great purpose. And the Boys and Girls Clubs had a pretty big part of that in his life. I've known him since he left the Boys and Girls Clubs, but we have a great friendship, and he comes periodically and speaks to groups for us. And he's a living testimony of how the Lord
Yeah.
worked in and through
Yeah.
a kiddo's life. And so we have hundreds of stories like that. And it's a privilege to be just a small part of God when he shows off. And we're just trying to be obedient to the kids and families we have in our care now. It's tough out there, and you know the streets better than most of us, but families are hurting and struggling, but God has
Yeah.
everything they need. And to be a vehicle of his, a tool of his, an instrument of his, it's a privilege. I have the easy job. I get to go out and tell stories about it. I tell people I raise friends and funds.
Yeah.
If I can just put God's work in front of, there's so many generous people that love the Lord and want to love and support his work. If I can just help them see it, it speaks for itself. And so that's the privilege I have day to day, is to go around and tell people about how God's moving in and through the Boys and Girls Clubs here in Longview and Marshall.
That's great. And so you mentioned earlier something about life coach as well, and or coaching or some kind of coaching. Tell me what it is that you do. And you said you still get to do a little bit of it. So
I
tell me about
do.
that.
So the board here, it's been a huge part. Again, it kind of goes back to the baseball platform. God gives us platforms. He gives us talents. And I feel like he's given me some talent in that area of leadership. And so I want to give that back to him. And so the board, when I came, knew that I have had a side business. It's been a huge part of who I am. It coincides well with ministry and what I've been doing, but they've given me the freedom as I can. I'll go do trainings, or I have a clientele now of about 6 coaching clients, where it's really leadership coaching. Wherever there's a team and a leader, I have the privilege sometimes to come beside that leader and that team to help them really develop their leadership skills and their heart for people. And I'm not a business coach. I focus more on the inside job of a leader, the heart. And and I still get to speak and do some training. So I'm very blessed to have the flexibility to do both.
How do you see that kind of join or intermingle or correlate with, your ability to share Jesus with others? Are you able to, in coaching leadership, are you able to bring the word of God to people?
Absolutely. I unapologetically let people know who I am. And it's kind of the book I mentioned to you. My leadership core values spell HEART. It's an acronym: humility, engagement, attitude, results today. I'm going to send you a copy because I know you need something else to read. But it all starts with humility.
I was telling my former guests that I'm ADHD. I'm in the middle of 6 different books right now.
Well, dude, mine's like a 3-hour read. It's a short book on purpose. You can handle it. I'll send you some extra caffeine if that helps. But I really, for me, leadership is Jesus. And I know this. So what I mean by that, I think in terms of multiplication. So if I'm sitting down with the CEO of a company like I am now, I'm very forthcoming about who I am, here are my values, just like I want to respect who they are. And a lot of times it's just a natural fit that God called us together. There are times where I've coached people who are non-believers, but it's still an opportunity for me to respectfully say, here's who Chad is, here are my values, and I'm very open about my faith. I don't beat people over the head with it. We don't have to do that, but we're not the Holy Spirit. But if we can show them first in our actions and they see that in our heart, it opens a great door. Because if you think about leadership is all about taking people from here to there.
Yeah.
And I think of Jesus. He had his 12. He had his inner circle. And how did he lead? First, he led by example. And he showed us his values, even his value to go to the cross and die for us. And he taught his disciples that. He lived it with his disciples. And then what did he do? He said, now go and do that. And so my framework for leadership coaching, if I were coaching you, it'd be like, man, how can I help Jeff catch a glimpse of who God has called him to be and to be the very best at that? And then how can Jeff pour that into his direct reports? So it's kind of a multiplication model. How can we multiply those Jesus values from the very top to the very front lines? And I'm very open about the tools and the strategies and the frameworks that I use. They kind of speak for themselves. And if you've read any of John Maxwell's stuff, there are a lot of great leadership writers out there, but he's very biblical based in his principles. And so I let the principles teach from that framework. And when the door is opened and I'm invited in to share, I definitely tell them how this connects directly to the heart of Jesus and the scripture. And so
Is there a
that's
better
what,
leader out there than Jesus was?
no,
Is there anybody that has better leadership skills?
I don't think so. I don't. There won't ever be, frankly, because when you
Yeah,
think about,
I
you
love it.
think about. I heard a great illustration Sunday when you cut Jesus, he bleeds love.
Mm,
You think about all the concepts of leadership. Now, I'm a so if you all the fads about servant leadership, that's a great phrase. But why don't you just say lead like Jesus?
yeah,
And so again, I think there's a very genuine those principles worked. What Jesus did works. It's still working today. And that's where my passion comes alive when I'm coaching, is to really show those core values. And that's really what my book tries to do. But yeah, I think the platform to share Christ in leadership coaching is very real. People are hungry for it at the highest levels. And his
yeah,
principles have worked for thousands of years. They will continue to work because they're about value in people, and they're about loving people. They're about holding people accountable because you care enough to hold them accountable. And we're here to produce fruit. Yeah, that's another thing, Jeff.
yeah.
If you want to really get me on my soapbox, Christian leadership is about producing fruit. It's about helping the Lord change lives.
Mm,
It's not, please hear me, it's not good enough just to say, oh, they've got such a good heart. Well,
yeah,
great, but put it to action. If we're not causing a difference, if we're not creating fruit, I don't know, you could go there for a while and park, but we're called to produce that fruit. And so I'm a very results driven believer that if I'm actively living and sharing and chasing Jesus with everything that I am, people are going to see that and he's going to show off in it. It's
yeah,
not a passive state ever. So I get real fiery about that, by the way. But yeah,
yeah. I couldn't
leadership
tell.
coaching, it's a great, man. You get behind the curtain with people. You talk
Yeah,
about people hurting and being vulnerable and being broken and being empty. It's a beautiful space to really let Jesus fill them up. And then it's like,
yeah,
man, now set that free, right? And so I get so it's such a privilege. I get so passionate about that. Thanks for
yeah.
asking about that.
So tell us about your book. What's it called? Where can we find it?
Oh man, thank you. Um, Leadership Heart Unleashed. I think let me if you can see it. It's on Amazon, but I am going to send you a copy. You're going to have to text me your address. But it's on Amazon. It's Heart, Humility, Engagement. I go through each chapter and just try to give some practical scriptures and tools on how to actually implement these things. So you talk about engagement. It's a great. I have a lot of passion for men. I think God's called men to lead, and I
Yeah,
love women. They have their place too. But man, we got to keep showing up as men. And I love to speak into a man's heart from God's word, especially there are a lot of men struggling. There are a lot of disengaged men, dads, husbands. And my wife and I even,
it doesn't seem like we tend to have forgotten the role that God intended for man sometimes in our lives. I think, and in society, for real, it's like
yeah,
I don't know. And again, you're right. We each, I mean, we have a place. That's what God has set us for, right? So we have responsibilities in a place, and I just feel like sometimes us men we forget that spiritual leadership is our calling. And
yeah,
so we kind of take a back seat on that sometimes on our spiritual growth in our families and our, learning more about the word. And so I love
yeah.
what you said about that because I think our society needs to remember
Oh
that role that he has for us.
man, can I just be raw for a second?
Of
And you
course.
can bleep this out if you want to.
Beep.
We have sissified, if that's a word, manhood. Well, society, the world's trying to. And I'm not a macho man. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a call in a man's life. Choose you this day who you serve, as a husband,
Mm,
as a father, as a dad,
yeah.
as a business leader. And I think sometimes we shy away from that, like you're saying, and we can't. Now more than ever, we've got to stand at the gate and draw our sword with love and humility, but we have to
Sure.
be fierce about it. And I think the enemy has tried to get us to back down, and we can't. And so anytime you want to go to battle on that conversation, I'd love to talk with you about that. That too. And you know, Jeff, it's really ironic. Today, there's a young man we are helping teach a young professionals class at Moberly. And Corey Perkins, who's another ministry. We went to a young man's funeral for his dad. He told us Sunday morning, hey, my dad passed away. So, of course, we're both like, we're going to be there for you. And to hear that young man and his brother stand up in the pulpit and talk about their dad as a godly man, as a godly warrior, they called out men today. And it was a really powerful, I mean, I'm goosebumping right now, man. It was a great reminder to hear young men call men out in the community to stand up. And that, man, that's a whole battle cry that we can talk about. But that's a huge passion of mine in leadership, being a husband, being a dad. Listen, I've done some marriage retreats. We do marriage coaching with couples. There's a huge call in a man's life to stand at the gate and be a provider and a protector and a teacher of the word to his family. And so I was deeply reminded of that again, even today. I'm very grateful for that. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. One of the things we like to close the podcast here with is a favorite scripture. Now, I do understand that is sometimes very hard. Scripture is fantastic from beginning to end.
Amen.
So we usually try to say, hey, it doesn't even matter if it's a verse, a chapter, a book, a storyline, a character. I don't care. What touches you the most from Scripture?
You know, it goes back to junior high school days, 2 Timothy 1:7. And it's one of the first verses my mom and dad and I memorized together, I think, as a kid. For God did not give me a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and sound mind and self-discipline. I think those aspects continue to take on a deeper meaning in my life, but we don't have to be afraid. And he does give us power and strength to do the things he's called us to do. He does want us to have self-control and manage ourselves and live well and be good stewards of our life, to have self-discipline, to be at our best. So that's really been an anchor verse for me, Jeff, that continues to show up in my mind and my heart. I cling to that verse still. And there, like you said, there's tons of others. Isaiah 6:8, send me. Who am I? Here, raise my hand, send me.
Yeah.
So those are just a couple that come to mind. But God's word is amazing. I love it. It's what we stand on. It's the anchor of our lives. So thank you for that question.
That's wonderful. Chad Patterson, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it very much.
We're just getting started, man.
I know. That's how it always works. I mean, God works so much that I could spend 2 to 3 to 4 episodes on one person sometimes. Wow. And so I'll tell you what I tell most people, and that is, hey, let's come back and do another episode, and we'll talk about another aspect of your life that God has just, poured in on, because I believe 100% that every episode we produce, God has the intention for that episode to be heard by somebody. So if you come back and you talk about another God thing, it's something else that somebody else is dealing with, and they need to hear it. So,
amen. What do they call that? Audience of one, right?
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
If it's just one, it's worth it. But hey, it is a pleasure to meet you. I appreciate your ministry,
you too,
your
man.
life, your example, and thank you for the blessing of tonight.
Yep. Thanks for your patience, and I appreciate you coming.
Okay. God bless you, brother.
You too. Bye-bye. Folks, if you want to learn more about who Jesus is, visit us at thetestamentpod.com. That's thetestamentpod.com. And click on the gospel message at the top of the page. Also, you can click on the Testament Podcast tab and learn more about our podcast and see what our most recent episodes are that we've launched. In addition, we're always looking for guests who want to brag on God. So please send yourself or someone you know to thetestamentpod.com and drop us a line with your interest, or email us at thetestamentpod@gmail.com. We'll send you all the information we need in order to book you for an interview. Remember, do your part. Help us get these testimonies out there. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and then like and share our posts so your friends can see what we're doing too. So thanks everybody for listening. Bye.